What's up YouTube, Demi here with another 3.0 spoiler video type thing. So if you don't want to see spoilers, you don't want to learn about anything that's being changed, just step out of this video now. Otherwise, feel free to stay. So there's been a bunch of stuff data mined from the beta client and the new patches that have been going out lately, and there's a ton of new changes coming in, so we're going to go ahead and go through a bunch of them together. This is going to cover like ascendancies, some skill gem changes, some tab changes, a lot of unique FLASK changes actually. They're like reworking a lot of things, so we're gonna go through all of it together. Starting with this little guy right here. Let me go on D&D first, hang on. So, the Deadly Infusion node on Assassin. Can you see that? What the fuck? Hang on. Stupid overlay. Alright, so 8% crit multi per power charge, 2% crit strike chance while at maximum power charges, and 1 to maximum power charges. So, the current Deadly Infusion is 8 multi, which is the same, but it gives you 0.5% crit strike chance per power charge. So say you get 7, which is pretty normal for like a top side of the tree assassin build. That's 3.5% base crit. The reason that's so strong is your base crit on most weapons is like 5 to 6. So it adds that percentage to the base crit, making this an 8% crit weapon. Or wait, 9% crit weapon, which is then multiplied by all of your increased critical strike chance across the tree. And it gets much, much higher because the base value is that much higher, right? This basically is cutting that almost in half. And then you get +1 maximum power charge, which is pretty cool. So that would make it a little bit easier to like get generic crit, but you lose the base crit. So base crit is so fucking good. Like, even on things that have 0% crit strike chance, like the Herald effects, like say you're in Herald of Thunder, the shocks, the lightning bolts, those don't have a base crit, but you can actually add base crit via the increased critical strikes gem, which gives you 2% base critical strike chance. And then if you had this as well with 7 power charges, you would go up to 5.5 base crit, which is then enough to scale up into crit cap with an assassin. You can no longer really do that because you only get 2% out of this, and 2% out of this. I mean, you can still get crit, but it's going to be a lot harder. So that's the first change. The second assassin change is Toxic Delivery. How do I the open image, whatever. So this is another assassin node, right? The current stuff is 10% reduced damage taken from damage over time. That's the same. You get 20% of his damage gained as extra chaos against bleeding enemy. That's the same. But then you have poison you inflict with crit strike chance deals 100% more damage, and bleeding you inflict on maimed enemies deals 100% more damage. I don't know how I just got to follow, I'm not streaming. So that's literally double damage. So say you have, after all of your other multipliers and whatnot, you deal 130,000 damage, random number, right? 100% more damage means you suddenly deal 260,000 damage. That's been cut by 2/3, less than 2/3, more than 2/3, sorry. It would be 33% if it was 2/3. So you get only 30% more damage with your poison and bleeds, which, like, combined with all of the loss of double dipping and all the other damage over time nerfs, it effectively means you're gonna do like piss nothing, but you get 30% more on top of that. So you do 30% more piss instead of 100% more piss. This sounds way more fun to me. But yeah, that's the second change. Third change is Swift Killer. This is actually a Trickster keystone here. I have to pull up PvE Planner for this one because I don't actually have that. Let's pull up Trickster Tree so you can compare. We've gone through these two, so I'll close them. So let's see. Shadow, Trickster. Alright, so here's the current stuff. We're looking at Swift Killer. Swift Killer is 15% chance to gain a frenzy charge on kill, +1 maximum frenzy charges. Seems kind of shitty, right? Because it's like Blood Rage and then an extra frenzy charge. Great. It's being buffed pretty hard. You get +1 max frenzy charges and max power charges, which is, holy shit, 2 points for both of those. That's great. You also get 5% damage over time per frenzy, 5% damage over time per power, and 15% chance to get a frenzy and a power charge on kill. That is massive. That's like Skyforce plus Blood Rage, plus damage, plus 1 of each. Like, that's holy shit. You could potentially do like frenzy discharges or something like that. That's pretty awesome for Tricksters. That's a pretty big buff. I'm happy about that. The next thing, which is amazing, is a currency tab change. So if you look at our current currency tab, it looks like this. You have 5 slots down here that hold 5k each. and then you have like one of each for everything else that holds 5k. And then you have mirrors and exalts. The things that are missing about this are there are no Parandis coin slots, which is in the core game. Parandis is always on Xana and is part of the Atlas, except for this league where they were like, fuck you standard players, you don't get access to Parandis, so you don't get Parandis banners from Kadiro. Irrelevant, sorry, that's just me raging. You don't have a Parandis coin slot, so in the beta, in the live beta, whatever, they added a coin slot right here, right? We have a nice little Parandis coin slot next to silver coins. That's amazing. We also get 9 additional 5k slots in the bottom. Like, I literally had to buy a second currency tab because my 5ks don't fit in one tab. So I could potentially move all of this shit into the bottom of this tab with the next patch. So your currency tabs that you have now, that you purchased, have just gained 45,000 currency slots, basically. Each one of these holds 5k, there's 9. Math is hard, I don't know how to do it, but I think that's right. So I could potentially move everything into one tab, which frees up this tab, which will have even more space, so I can then hoard even more currency. I'm gonna fill it with wisdom scrolls, because I have 10,000 transmutes to sell, so that'll be fun. But yeah, that's a pretty fucking huge thing, and I'm very excited about that, because like the Parandis coin thing was just, it needed to happen, but it shows that they're willing to keep expanding their tabs when new things are added to the game, new things are added to the core game, whatever, and like, they want to keep giving you more value on your purchases. So if you purchase something like this, like the div card tab currently is the best value because it's always expanding. Every time they add new div cards, there's just another slot added to this, so that's always expanding. There was not an expansion for the currency tab ever, so this is pretty cool. I'm very, very excited about this. For someone that flips currency a lot, this is huge. For people that like hoarding shit, this is pretty cool too. So the next thing is the Alchemist change. Alchemist is the Flask effect nodes up in Witch, and it is currently 8%, 8%, 12% duration, 14% effect. So 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 14 is 30% Flask effect for 3 points. It was nerfed to 10% duration, 10% effect. If the other 2 points are the same, that means it is translated into 26% Flask effect or Flask effect and 10% of duration. It doesn't sound like a big deal, right? You're like, oh, I'm losing 6% Flask effect. Who the fuck cares? Well, that is actually a rounding thing, where that can be the breakpoint for getting another max res or something like that. And for Pathfinder, which is the most hit by this, there is a flask called Dying Sun Ruby Flask that gives you 2 additional projectiles during Flask effect. 2 projectiles, right? We get 30% Flask effect here, and then from Pathfinder itself, we get 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%, and 5%. So that is another, sorry, there's 4 of them, so that's 20%, right? 20 plus 30 is 50%. 50% increased effect of 2 brings you up to 3 projectiles. If you lose that 6%, because of the way the rounding in this game works, you will have a total of 44% flash charges, or sorry, Flask effect, which is not enough to get the extra projectile. So that's a huge nerf to barrage builds, to like lightning arrow builds. Ice shot, everything that uses a projectile with Dying Sun is losing that as a Pathfinder. They lose that 3rd projectile, which is massive. And across the board, everywhere else, you lose a little bit of Flask effect, and that's just like not cool, man. That's a very smart way to do it. It's a very small change. You lose 4% Flask effect duration, but it breaks Dying Sun interaction for Pathfinder, and that's not fun. So that's kind of annoying. But they're trying to reduce the power of flasks in general and unique flasks, because the meta currently is just do this all the time, and it's like, please, I want to, no, please, I'm gonna get carpal tunnel. But yeah, that's that. So the next thing that we're looking at is Chieftain Ascendancy. Namu's Flames Advance, so I'm going to go ahead and swap to a Chieftain real quick. Let's grab Hot Tater Tot, my RF Chieftain. So, Namu's Flame Advance, whatever, is currently 50% chance to ignite, 35% increased damage against burning enemies, right? That's generic, it works against everything that's burning, that's great. In the beta, they're adding increased damage with hits and ailments against burning enemies, so that way that the new dot changes, you can then apply that increased damage to both types of things, which is great. It's just like a quality of life change, so it still works with everything. So that's a good change. Minor change, but very good for the beta. Okay, so this is pretty huge. These are data-mined currencies coming out of the new patches and stuff, right? Let me adjust the window size. So we got a lot of things here. So we have Orb of Annulment, removes a random property from an item. Now that by itself sounds stupid, right? But if it interacts with like prefixes cannot be changed and suffixes cannot be changed and other mons such as that, I could potentially like metacraft with those. So say you have, let me look, where's my bow? Like a double T1 prefix item, and you want to metacraft suffixes. If you lock the prefixes with prefixes cannot be changed, and then you use an annulment on it, it could potentially, like, if you lock the prefixes and you only have one suffix, it's going to remove that suffix for you, because there's no other option. It says random, but because there's no other option, there's nothing else it can remove, so it will remove that thing. Here's a double T1 prefix item. It's Merciless Dictator's prefix. So, like, if I was metacrafting suffixes and I blocked the prefix, exalted a suffix, and it was shit, I could then do prefixes cannot be changed and annul it, and it would delete the last mod, maybe? I don't know. We're not sure. I'm not sure how common these are. That's just like a way to use it. And then we have Orb of Binding. Upgrades a normal item to a rare item with up to 4 linked sockets. So I don't know what the up to means. Maybe it's based on the item level. But this is basically an alchemy orb that's combined with fusing orbs. So I'm betting it's like a recipe of alks and fusings. If these actually go in, of course. All these are hypothetical. We don't know if these are in for sure. It's probably a recipe to combine fusings with alks somehow. This is a really, really nice thing for leveling. It's like a huge convenience thing while you're leveling, or in solo self-found when you just need a 4-link, whatever. And you pick up one of these, you just throw it on a normal item, and you get a 4-link out of it, and it's a rare item, so that's huge. I like that. We have Orb of Horizons, reforges a map item as another of the same tier. This is really good if you're like doing the Atlas completion stuff, and say you just did like this path, right? You came through this side, you went up here, and you're in this part right here, and you've done basically just this part of the Atlas. Which means to get to these T13s and these T14, 15s, whatever, you have to go through all of these paths. But with this orb, you could just re-roll whatever you have a bunch of. So say I'm stuck getting plazas and ivory temples, I can just use an Orb of Horizons on it, re-roll my plaza maps into a random other T13 map, which would allow me to then access these T13s on the other side of the Atlas, without having to complete all this bullshit first. That's huge for progression on the Atlas. It's very nice for solo self-found. If you're stuck in a hole somewhere, say you keep getting fucking Minotaur drops, and you want to run a different Guardian, you can just re-roll your Minotaur into a different map. That's incredible. It's great. Okay, so what we have here. Engineer's Orb. I haven't actually looked at a lot of these. These are all on the fly. Improves the quality of a strongbox. Right click, blah, blah, blah. Has greater effect on lower rarity strongboxes. Maximum quality is 100%. I mean, I guess. There's not currently a way that I know of to quality strongboxes, so that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, that makes sense. So you basically would scour it down. It's probably the same as a whetstone and an armor scrap, and whatever, they give 5% on whites, 2% on magics, 1% on rares or uniques. So if you can scour it down and then use 4 of these, you get 20% quality strongbox. Quality on things usually gives, on maps especially, like currently, if you do 20 quality on a map, it adds 20% quantity as well. So like, that would give you an additional 20% quantity on your strongbox, which is a lot of extra drops to get. That's great. This item is really weird to me. It's an Ancient Orb. It reforges a unique item as another of the same item class. So if you have a unique that has multiple items of the same, like here, let's look for an example so I can explain this better. Let's look for example, a flask. You have Lion's Roar, which is a granite flask, and you have Rumies, which is also a granite flask. So if I keep picking up Lion's Roars and I need a Rumies, I could just use one of these and reforge it into a unique item as another of the same item class. I don't know if it can roll the same exact unique, but if it can't, and there's only 2 of them, I mean, you can just flip back and forth between the 2. Or for example, I think Ruby flasks have 2 uniques. There's Dying Sun, and there's the, fuck, do I have one? Coruscating Elixir? I don't think I have one. Or I'm just blind. I don't need to search for it, but yeah, there's only 2, so you can just swap back and forth. That's kind of cool. I'm trying to think of high-end uniques that have shitty bases, but like people are going to probably try to use this to reroll into headhunters from leather belts. There's a lot of shit leather belts. You're very unlikely to get a headhunter. If it's weighted the same way as chancing or dropping them are, it's going to be very, very hard to get something like that, but it is an option. So then we have the shards for these. We have annulment shards for Orb of Annulment. We have binding shards for Orb of Binding. We have horizon shards for Orb of Horizons. Engineer shards for Engineer's Orbs. Ancient shards for Ancient Orbs, whatever. And then we have some weird stuff, right? We have chaos shards, mirror shards, exalted shards, and regal shards. Now there are shards currently in the game. We have shards to give you higher tier orbs, like 20 transmute shards becomes a transmute, 20 alts becomes an alteration, 20 alt shards, sorry. So like, what I'm seeing these to be are replacements or redoing of the way the Chaos recipe, Regal recipe, Chancellor recipe works. If they remove the Chaos recipe entirely, but when you vendor identified Chaos or items 60 item level 60 or higher, you could potentially just get Chaos shards back, which saves you a ton of inventory space, a ton of time min-maxing your inventory space, arranging all that trash to do a recipe. Chaos recipe is one of each item, so you need a weapon, a helm, a chest, an amulet, 2 rings, gloves, belt, boots. You sell it to a vendor. If they're un-ID'd, you get 2 Chaos. If they're item level 60 or higher, if any of them are ID'd, you get 1 Chaos. If they change it so when you just vendor any rare item that's above I-60, you have chances to get Chaos shards. It totally removes the Chaos recipe, which is amazing. Same for the Regal shards. Like, those two things, the recipes are so fucking frustrating to do, and they're just a trickle of income. So, like, we currently only get Alch shards, Alteration shards, and Transmute shards out of vendoring identified and unidentified items. So if they get those and they add these in, I mean, that's pretty cool. The Exalted shards and the Mirror shards, I'm really not sure how to feel about that. 20 shards becomes a Mirror of Calandra. That would mean, like, if these are even remotely obtainable, 20 shards for a mirror. So that would mean the current value of mirrors and standard is around 180 exalts. 1 mirror shard would be 9x. I don't know if these would be, like, dropped randomly at a lesser rarity than a mirror, obviously, 20 times less maybe. So you could potentially buy these before you get to your mirror stage, or you could drop a mirror shard and then either collect the rest to get a mirror or just sell it. Like, that's a pretty cool concept. I would love to see something like that, because getting a mirror to drop is something that 99% of the player base is never going to see. This would be something that, like, 95% of the player base is never going to see. So, like, there's a potential to get something like that. Exalted shards, I don't know how those would react either. Maybe it's like a recipe, or a div card, or like Emperor's Luck gives you Exalted shards. I don't know. But these are pretty cool. I really like Chaos and Regal shards. I would fucking love it if they got rid of those recipes. They're just stupid. But yeah, those are all the datamined currencies. And now we head into flasks. This is where shit gets pretty crazy, okay? So, like, there are a ton of changes to unique flasks. It was barely mentioned in the last manifesto, which I did a video on. At the very bottom, they were like, upcoming changes to unique flasks. Balance changes to unique flasks. There was nothing else there, right? They didn't have any other information there, so it was just that. So we're going to go over all of these. It's pretty intense, so just hang tight with me. At Ziri's promise, instead of the current version, which I'll try to pull up a version as we go so you can compare. Ziri's promise is maximum is 25 Fizz is extra chaos, 15 Ellie is extra chaos, right? The new version is 15 to 20 and 10 to 15, so they nerfed it by basically 5% max and minimum, so it's just worse across the board. Same Chaos Leech, still 2 uses, still an Amethyst Flask, but it's just worse. That's how most of these changes are, they just get worse. And we have Dying Sun Ruby Flask. You have the same 10% to 10% reduced charges used as before, so that's fine. But instead of the 30% increased AoE during Flask effect, it's being changed to a roll that is now 15 to 25% AoE during Flask effect. And that's a pretty huge nerf to the AoE. Like, I mean, we already got huge AoE nerfs in 2.6. There's a video in that in the Demi Splains playlist as well, but like, everything got smaller basically. The amount of maximum AoE you could get got hugely nerfed. This flask was one of the largest sources, and they're nerfing that source down by half to 5%. Like, that's pretty huge. You lose half or 1/6. What is 1/6 in percentage? I don't know, like 15, 16, 18%, something like that. You lose a lot. You still get 2 projectiles, but you lose a lot of AoE. That sucks. Next, FLASK. Kiara's Determination. I actually really hate this flask in the current iteration, so they probably made it worse, which is just like, why? So you have a Kiara's Determination. It's a very short duration onslaught flask, and it only has 1 use. At maximum quality, it gives you 3.5 seconds with 50% reduced duration, right? So if you look at this one, it has all the same rolls, except for now it's 60% reduced duration. So you would lose another 10% duration on this, which would bring it down to 3.2 seconds. An already shitty flask, for me, it's only 1 use and it lasts 3 seconds. It's going to become even shittier. Remember, we're also losing some duration here, and I'm sure we're going to probably lose duration elsewhere. This becomes even more worthless then. So that's just like, rip Kiara's to me. It's already shit, but now it's worse. And now we have Lion's Roar. Lion's Roar is a granite flask that currently has 30 to 35% melee physical damage on it. More melee physical damage, which is kind of stupid for a flask. Here's a one-off perfect. It just gives you more melee physical damage. This is reduced. The current range is 30 to 35, I said. This is reduced to 20 to 25, so it's reduced by 10%. 1/3. They're cutting the boost of this in 1/3. So that's a huge damage loss for melee builds. Because this flask is like another more multiplier for your setup. It's what you get at endgame to like get more damage. You need this damage to like get melee to scale correctly, and they're nerfing that pretty hugely. So that's kind of annoying. Taste of Fate Sapphire Flask. This is a very commonly used flask. This is a non-legacy version. It's 20% phase taken as cold, and then you gain 20 to 30% of your physical damage as extra cold damage during flask effect, right? It's being nerfed down to 15 to 20% of your physical damage as extra cold damage, so you lose 5 to 10% of your fizz damage as extra cold. That's a lot. It's a lot of lost cold damage. The mitigation is the same, which I like. They didn't kill the fizz mitigation, which is the main reason people use this flask, but the damage aspect of it is now much worse. So you just lose a lot of damage there. We'll go to Vessel of Vingtar. This is actually a fucking massive nerf to Vingtars, right? The way Vingtars currently works, this is, okay, let me get a non-legacy so it doesn't look weird. Here's a non-legacy Vingtars. You get 80 to 100% increased charges used, that's the same. Same roll down here. And then you have, people are trying to buy Wise Oak, so they read this manifesto. You have shocks nearby enemies during flask effect, you are shocked during flask effect, right? Shock is a status ailment that means you take 50% increased damage taken. It actually says that now for when you are shocked, but the enemies, they get a lesser shock effect. They no longer take 50% increased damage, which is the same as a 50% more multiplier. They only take 10% increased damage, so you lose 40% more damage from your Vingtars. They cut this by 80% damage. That's ridiculous. That's a huge nerf, right? So the thing that's cool about this though is the damage ranges look the same. You still have 20% leech. You still have 20% leech to life as mana, but they also gave us back instant leech during flask effect. So you gain life and mana instantly during flask effect. It does not say energy shield, so that means that this does not work with energy shield after 3.0. But they are giving it the legacy effect of leech applies instantly during flask effect. The current version does not have that role. So this is like a weird compromise between legacy Vingtar, double legacy, and this now, after this happens, and single legacy Vingtars. You lose 40% more damage, but you gain instant leech for life and mana. It's really weird. I think the damage is more important than the instant leech, personally, because Volpack's like not that hard to get, but I don't know how I feel about this. It's a pretty big damage nerf, which I mean, that combined with all the multipliers to boss health and things like that, this is like, it's gonna feel a lot worse at endgame to kill things, which I think is the goal. Like, they don't want us to insta-kill bosses, and that's fine by me. I don't want to kill a boss in 0.2 seconds and do the map in a minute. Like, that's no fun. There's no challenge in a boss fight if they die instantly. So, like, we'll just have to wait and see what this means, but that's Vingtars. Wise Oak. This is a huge change. That's why that guy was just trying to buy my Wise Oak, actually. I'm going to pull all these out in case they go Legacy. I'm pretty sure they will. Wise Oak currently is 10% reduced damage taken of each element which your uncapped LE res is lowest. Sounds complex, I know, but uncapped LE res are these numbers right here. So these numbers, that is your uncapped res. So for me, my lowest uncapped res is fire resistance, which means I take 10% reduced fire damage, right? During flask effect, damage penetrates 20% resistance for each element of which your uncapped resistance is highest. So my highest is lightning. I would gain 20% lightning pen out of this, and then with all of my other flask effect shit, 30% here, 20% here, it goes up to another 50% flask effect. This is effectively 30% LE pen, right? That's massive. I don't know why I'm missing fire is. Anyways, that's weird. So that's a huge nerf to the effectiveness of this flask. But I mean, this flask is fucking ridiculous. If you have perfect resistances, if you have like 100, 100, 100, you just you get 30% LE pen as Pathfinder for all three types, and you take 10% less damage of all three types. That's ridiculously good. And this flask is like 10 chaos in League, and it's like an accent standard. It's a ridiculously overpowered flask. And it's also from Pokemon. Like, I don't know if you realize this, but it's not, when it's full, it's red, green, blue. Or, yeah, green, blue, red, right? Those are the colors of the starter 3 Pokemon. They're not the colors in PoE. PoE is yellow, blue, red. There's no yellow here because green is Bulbasaur and Squirtle and Charmander. This is a supporter unique, and it was made to be Pokemon related. So if you didn't know that, there you go. There's a little bit of trivia for you. So that's the Wise Oak. What's our next Flapsk? And then Witchfire Brew. Witchfire Brew is a Flask that grants you dot. Here's a perfect one. It goes from 50 to 70% if I remember right. So it's being nerfed all the way down to 25 to 40% damage over time, which is just about 50% less than it currently is. It still gives you the 21 Vuln Curse effect, which is great, but it's like you lose a ton of damage over time here. And then our last Flapsk is Diamond Flask, which is a utility flask. I don't know if I have one in storage. I don't usually pick up white flask. Oh, I got a couple. Okay, so currently it's 20 out of 40 charges, right? The new version, you get 1 charge. It's 80 out of 80. 80 charges is a lot. Like, I don't know if you know, most flasks have 60 charges. It takes a while to fill a single flask. 80 charges with 1 use, and they also nerfed the duration down to 4 seconds from, I think, 5.5. Diamond Flask got shit on. Really bad. And I don't know if it's going to go Legacy. I don't think it will, because if it does, that's really weird, but I mean, it's possible. But like, Diamond Flask just, it got wrecked really badly. So that's not cool. But yeah, that's all of the changes I have for you here. There's a lot, so I mean, if that was a lot to take in, I'm sorry, but it's just a huge overview. And I hope it will help you guys learn something from it. These are all proposed and or data mine changes. We're not 100% sure these are going to happen, but if they happen, a lot of things are going Legacy. And a lot of weird shit's going to happen across the market and the board. So if you have any of these items and you think they're going to go Legacy, I highly recommend you hold on to them until after 3.0 hits. Because if you get a Legacy item and it's better than what it used to be, that's better than what it turns into, your item becomes worth more. If it becomes worse than what you have, then I mean, whatever. You took the gamble. But it's an investment thing. I would hold on to all of my possible Legacy uniques just in case. But I think that'll wrap up this beta spoilers video. If you guys enjoyed, hit the like button, comment, subscribe. Suggestions for the next video are always welcome. Check me out on Twitch. I stream almost every day. And if you really want to help support the stream and my career, I do YouTube, Twitch full-time. I have a Patreon linked in the description below. Anything that you can do to support is greatly appreciated, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that will be Demi out. I'll see you in the next one.